Welcome to the Be What You Want podcast. My name is Chris Hall, your host, and today we've got Tony J Hughes. Tony is a B2B sales strategist, an improvement consultant, and was recently named by LinkedIn as one of the top voices of 2018. I'm really excited to have Tony on the show today to tap into some of the distinctions that make B2B sales different in particular, and also to connect with an influencer online. It's really a pleasure to get into some of the mindsets and tactics and strategies that influencers do. So Tony, welcome to the podcast. It really is a pleasure to have you on.
Chris, thank you. Really appreciate you having me on and looking forward to the chat.
Good man, good man. Well, look, I always like to start from the heart. Can you tell us a little bit about why you love sales?
Well, I think in essence, selling is all about making a positive difference in the life of our customer, both personally and in their business. And the reality is any entrepreneur, any business person, they're not going to be successful unless they can personally sell. And the salespeople for most organizations are making sure that everybody else in the company or the organization actually has a job. So I think selling is incredibly important. It's often undervalued. It's not respected to the level that it should be, and it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note of the owner, the entrepreneur being able to sell, I've had that personal experience myself in some of my earlier businesses where I got in some more junior resources, tried to train them up. And ultimately, sometimes, especially for the solopreneurs, startups, growing a team stage, I've found in personal experience that the owner, the founder is, as long as they've got the right personality, should we say, and gusto, they often are the best person to sell. Just out of interest on that kind of note of things, I was having a really interesting chat with Daniel Mumby. He's that startup guy. He's also on LinkedIn in a big way. And he was telling us a distinction about within a founding team of a company, and that you need to have 4 key elements. Let me just try and see if I can remember them. One of them was about, understanding the industry, someone that can acquire customers, and someone that can sell. And then, can't remember the 4th one right now, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because I asked him that question. I said, is it necessary for the founder to sell? And his answer was, as long as someone on the founding team can absolutely do that. But I think it very much is in alignment with your point there, that whether it be the founder or a founding team, no one else, especially in those early stages, can sell the business as well as the founders. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and the really interesting thing is that most of us focus on can we sell our product or service. But the reality is before any of us get the opportunity to do that, we must first be able to sell ourselves to the person. So, the first transaction is always trust. And then we need to sell the other person on why they need to give us access to information and potentially some people in their team. So unless they'll do that two-way dance with us, we're never really going to make a worthwhile sale. So the sort of notion that telling is selling or selling is all about projecting some kind of value proposition is not how it works today. Buyers expect us to turn up with some insight. They expect us to truly know them, to personalize what we're talking about, to anticipate what would actually matter to them, and to tailor the conversation accordingly. And the reality is we really need to think about, how do I provide value in the conversation for somebody well in advance of them ever thinking about deriving value from buying my product or service. So, whether they buy anything, we want to make sure that they get something out of the conversation.
Isn't that interesting? Because I was going to tap into that area of what is value. And I think it's one thing that I think a lot of businesses get wrong is that they think just because they like their product or service, like whether it be the sales team or the founder, they go, oh, I've got this really cool idea, it's this. And they get just, in the eyes of the customer, it's just blah, blah, blah. What about me? And so it needs to be value in the eyes of the beholder, i.e. the customer. And that's very interesting. You've added value into the conversation there, which is that extra level of depth, isn't it?
Yeah. And the really interesting thing about value is only the customer is truly qualified to define the value. Only the customer is qualified to call something a solution. And yet most sellers run around in the marketplace using those two terms, and they're really just perceived as hackneyed cliches. And the other interesting thing is when most people go and sell, they often tend to focus on why they think they're different from their competition, instead of first leading with why a conversation would matter at all for the person, and really anchoring, in essence, what I call the business case value. So if you're selling in a business to business world, you need to think about, well, what would be the customer's business case for changing the way they're doing things right now?
Yes.
Because unless the pain of change is less than the pain of same, the pain of staying in current state, then the person isn't going to change. So they're really thinking, if I'm going to go through the time, effort, and risk of doing things differently, what really is the reward? Is it a big enough reward when I look at all of the competing priorities for my time and attention?
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so just out of interest, in terms of the two levels of value that we're tapping into here, you've got the value in the initial conversation, and that's in the eyes, of course, of the customer. Before we even, that must be demonstrated in their eyes before we even go to products or services. In the B2B sales environment in particular, is it essential for business case to be very clearly articulated? So is that one of the main factors, or the other ingredients that kind of get sprinkled into that initial conversation opener?
Yeah, well, there's really two things that will drive a sale. It's either from the customer's point of view, there is a compelling event. So, there's a compelling event, a sort of burning platform that they're standing on that they've got to get fixed. Or in the absence of a compelling event, there needs to be a compelling business case. And it was really interesting that you talked, Chris, about two levels of value. So, and what you said, which really you played back, is obviously dead right. But the other thing to think about is that there's the intrinsic value of what it is that we offer. So, that's the features, functions, the sort of problem we think we solve with our product or service. But then there's the extrinsic value that the seller brings to the table in providing insights in how they could apply it to their business, and how they can de-risk implementation, for example. So the intrinsic value of the product or service, and then the extrinsic value that the seller brings to the buyer in the way that they engage with them.
Could you unpack that a little bit, just for the benefit of the audience? Like, could we give an example of intrinsic and also extrinsic?
Yeah, so for example, I spent a number of years in the customer relationship management software industry. And typically a customer, maybe their accountant has said to them, or a consultant has said to them, hey, you really need a CRM system to sort of manage, your whole sales machine, or manage customer life cycle. So the company will go to market and invite a number of companies to come in. Obviously, the global leader in the space is Salesforce. But, the way a seller of a CRM system can bring extrinsic value is not only can they answer the customer's questions about product, but they can ask questions like, hey, absolutely, I'll answer all of your questions, but do you mind if I ask what's happened inside your organization that's caused you to think you even need a system like this? And what do you think implementing a system like this is going to do for you at a business level? Because unless, as the buyer, I'd love to sell you a product, but unless as you, the buyer, unless you're really clear about the outcomes you're trying to achieve, the danger is you're just going to implement this very expensive contacts database and a manage up forecasting tool that no one really believes. So, do you mind if I ask what's actually happened? Have you had a rep walk out of the business and take their pipeline, your customers with them? Have you lost a big customer and you're trying to do a better job of creating customer experience? Are you trying to, support the entire life cycle of customers through marketing, selling, onboarding, servicing, and renewing them, and you want to manage that life cycle better? Are you wanting, decent forecasting to give the CEO and the board? So what problem are you trying to solve? Because unless you've got clarity, you're already in trouble with your project. Now, if a salesperson goes and engages that way, that's what I mean by the extrinsic value in the engagement. They're bringing them some wisdom and insight. They're being brave enough to take a point of view, even to maybe to challenge and reframe the thinking of the customer. And what all of the research says is that the first one to really educate the buyer, they become the emotional favorite. 75% of the time, they actually win the business. And the other research that's quite interesting, done by Corporate Executive Board, now Gartner, some years ago, is that more than half of the decision weighting when a business organization makes an evaluation for a number of suppliers, more than half of the weighting comes from the way that organization engaged with them. Brand and product or service features together are less than 40%. Price is less than 10%, more than 50% is the way the organization engaged.
Wow, that's so significant. You know what? I think there's a parallel here to coaching, because I do a combination of personal coaching and also business coaching. And one of the key cornerstones of the way that you have a conversation is that the coach asks the client questions that allow the client to explore the subject matter in their own mind. And when they do that, the thing is, the brain is all about synapses and making connections. So quite literally, I think by the salesperson asking, a completely authentic, perhaps a bold question, all those beautiful examples you just gave, you allow the customer to make a little connection in their mind that maybe they hadn't made yet. And then not only are they making a connection to the subject matter, they're making a connection emotionally to you because they feel understood, and everyone wants to be understood. And they're also making a connection probably subconsciously to your product. And if that's done with authenticity, then indeed that's got to be part of the trust piece, doesn't it, as well? So it's wow, it's all holistic, it's all linked. That's fascinating. I find that really incredible, actually. Okay.
Yeah. And Chris, if I can jump in, I really love what you just said about your approach to coaching, and your approach is bang on. And the reason it's so important is because people retain information and are best motivated by things they themselves discover. So if we just tell somebody something, it rarely ever sticks. But if we ask great questions that help them have their own epiphany, that they need to change their thinking in this area, or that this particular factor or issue, is really important, it'll really stick. So, people are best motivated by reasons that they themselves discover. That's why questions are so key.
Absolutely. And what we've just constructed here as a framework, if you put that in contrast to the traditional, certainly disliked now hard sell, they're just worlds apart, aren't they, in terms of trying to ram it down a customer's throat, for example. You just can't do that, especially in comparison to that wonderful constructed framework and engagement. Wow. Okay. So we may have already tapped into some of the elements, but I'd still like to ask you the question: what are most businesses getting wrong in B2B sales?
What most organizations are getting wrong is their sales approach is all about them instead of all about the customer. So the thing that every organization really needs to obsess about is, what problem do I really solve for whom? Why does it matter? And what's the business case for them in working with us and changing? So we need to get very good about defining what an ideal customer profile is. There's no shortage of prospects out there in the world. There's only a shortage of hours in the day and resources with which we can go and pursue opportunity. So we need to get really good at identifying where there's alignment rather than trying to run around being an evangelist. So alignment is far more powerful than evangelism. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to define our buyer personas. So if we think, well, there's three key roles inside these organizations that are part of that decision process, whether it's the CEO, the CFO, if you're selling tech, maybe the CIO, there can be others, but really define those buyer personas, what matters to them, how they're measured in terms of KPIs. Then what we need to do is we then need to journey map. We need to think about, how does their journey, most journeys start online or with someone in their trusted network that they talk to when they feel they've got a problem. But we need to journey map their process and work out, how do we align our selling process with their buying process, and how do we create a good quality collateral that does add value for them in that journey, that educates, provides insight. And the really interesting thing in all of this as we do it is, for those who are listening to this who are marketers or the leaders of business who care about marketing, we need to think about, what do my buyers look for online before they'd ever know to look for me or my brand? And I'll just give you an example of this. The sport I do with my family is wakeboarding. And a number of years ago, we went from a water ski boat to a wakeboard boat. And the consequence of that was we needed a bigger four-wheel drive to tow our rig. And I Googled 3,500 kilo towing capacity. Nothing came back from any car manufacturer against that search phrase. So what they were all thinking about was their brand, Toyota Land Cruiser, Jeep Grand Cherokee, Nissan Patrol, whatever all the brands are, why they thought their product was great. What they did not think about was, what triggers somebody to need a bigger four-wheel drive? And it's typically they've bought a bigger or an initial caravan or a bigger boat. And then they'll be thinking about, well, what will tow the weight of the rig that I've got? But none of them had created content for it. So
Wow.
really important to also think about content. So they're kind of the three things, right? Define what an ideal customer profile is, define the buyer personas that we're going to be engaging with and what really matters to them, and then journey map the whole thing and make sure that we've got good collateral that supports every step of the journey and that we align our process.
Yeah, fascinating. On that, on the car example of the 3.5 ton capacity, it may seem obvious, but if marketeers aren't already tapping into things like Google AdWords and the keyword planning functionalities online, then, for example, with a keyword planner, I could know that you and another 1,000 people in Australia are searching for that key term, and therefore there's an opportunity to think.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, but it does also require thinking outside of the box, doesn't it? And genuinely putting yourself in the eyes of Tony Hughes because he's taking up wakeboarding, right? You know that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It can be a little left field, but it's relevant, so relevant. And on that idea of what they're looking for, like for example, one of the things I do is I do workshops in Gallup Strengths, which is a leadership methodology. And I know that I used to work in IT, in professional services, in consultancy. So I know that if I was doing basically the same workshop for a professional services firm, it would be, look, how can strengths implement things within your project environment and your B2B customer relationships and the delivery function of your business. And then if I was doing basically the same workshop to say a creative agency in marketing and advertising, it would be, look, how can we use strengths to access innovation and influence? You know, because different things matter, but it might be essentially very similar products that we come up with, but you have to speak the language, don't you, of the customer and the driver.
So true.
Okay. So let's talk about methodology for a second. In B2B sales in particular, is there a scientific methodology that works for B2B sales, or does it really truly need to be adapted to each industry and client and product?
Well, there's lots of different strategic selling methodologies out there. I even created my own one. So, but here's to me what we need to really think about. Any B2B selling methodology needs to cater to obviously a whole bunch of things. So you need to be able to qualify people well. So there's lots of different qualification frameworks. Maybe people that are watching this have heard of the BANT framework. You know, so does the person I'm talking to, do they have a budget? Do they have authority? Do they have a real need? And do they have a timeline for making a decision? So, you know, that's fine. That's a lens through which we, the seller, can decide, am I wasting my time here or not? But here's the reality. No buyer or potential customer wants to feel like you're qualifying them. So we need to nuance qualification with discovery so that it's a thing that happens naturally. And the most important thing in qualification is not those 4 questions at all, or 4 issues. The most important thing is, to what degree will my potential customer provide me with information? So they'll open up and provide me with information. And to what degree will they give me access to their people? So if you're selling B2B, there'll be a number of people in the organization that'll constitute consensus for them making a decision. So qualification is certainly important. The next 4 elements that really must be covered in the business-to-business sale is we've got to make sure that we're covering the right relationships. So most people are busy selling to a level in the organization they're comfortable with, but there's typically people with decision authority above those people that have power of veto, or that end up really just making the decision, and then we end up being dependent on a lower level person trying to carry our message. So giant mistake to sell too low. So we need relationships with the right people. We then need a strategy. My methodology, by the way, is RSVP selling. So this is the acronym. So relationships at the right level. They then need a strategy for managing those relationships and a strategy for dealing with the competition. Not that we ever negatively sell or talk about competition, but we need to know that the customer is going to make a comparison. So what are they comparing us with? So we need a strategy also for dealing with the competition. The biggest competitor we need to think about is the competitor of do nothing, apathy, status quo. Just, you know, about 25% to a third, depending on the industry, of deals that get lost by sales organizations get lost to the customer doing nothing. What that leads us to, if we think about that, we don't want them to do nothing. What that leads us to is the V in RSVP, which is value. You know, how does the customer define value? How are we creating best value for them and managing their risk? What's the real business case that we can help them with? If we help them with their business case, we'll become the emotional favorite. If we help them gather consensus in the organization, we'll become the emotional favorite. If we educate them, we're the emotional favorite. And then the P in RSVP is, do we truly understand their evaluation, selection, and procurement process? P is for process. Most people don't really understand the customer's process for making decisions or buying. So that last piece, the P in RSVP, enables us to forecast accurately. So, that's my own framework. You can use a complex tool I built to do that, or you can just have it as a conversation. So if you're talking to a sales rep, hey, draw on a whiteboard for me the relationships you've got in this account. What's your strategy? We'll talk about the politics and the strategy for managing them. Who are we competing against? What's your competitive strategy? How do they define value in working with us? Are we providing value, creating value better than anybody else? And what's their process? How can you forecast this? Gee, your forecast date in the CRM is the last day of the quarter. That looks like our date, doesn't look like their date. So you tell me what their process is. When do they need to be, have our solution implemented? Let's work backwards to a date where they'd need to make a commitment to us.
Yes. And exactly. I know that with my events in particular, I've got a kind of a wisdom about the typical number of months and weeks it would take in reality to even get an invoice paid, to get things prepared. I deal with a lot of medium-sized businesses, and that means that my decision maker is often the director, the CEO, or learning and development manager. And what's interesting for B2B environments such as myself is that you've got to create these new relationships, right? And what I take this attitude of not cold calling, because I think, I know the wisdom of don't just wait for the junior to take it up to the senior and you don't have any visibility of that, and then maybe it just drops dead after 6 months. Ideally, you want to get straight through to the decision maker, but in order to do so, you've got to genuinely provide value and you've got to build trust. So I suppose this is a good segue to ask you about that, because I saw this wonderful quote from you, which I think is brilliant. Business is done at the speed of trust. Now we've started to tap into the way that we build trust through the value of the business case and, and the things we talked about. Let's imagine, you're trying to access the top dogs, right? Whether it be someone at the board level, the CEO, because that's the way your B2B environment is going. When they're a new relationship, how do you, build that trust at a lightning speed, should we say, or a more relevant speed, and do it in the right way so you don't break it? You can't just kind of go, you know what I mean? How do we access that trust with that kind of level?
So a couple of things about trust. The first thing is, unless we create trust, there'll be no business done at all. But the rate at which we can build trust determines the speed at which they'll move and the size of the commitment they're willing to make. So the best way to begin a relationship with a level of trust is to begin the relationship through a referral, through a common person in both of our networks. So we begin with a degree of trust if we do it that way. I mentioned earlier the concept of trigger events. So for example, when I bought a new wakeboard boat, for anybody selling big four-wheel drives, then that was a trigger event that creates the need to buy big four-wheel drive. Interestingly, when I went and saw the boat dealer that we bought the wakeboard boat from, they really own the market for wakeboard boats. I said, has any car dealer come and talked to you about some kind of alliance for selling, four-wheel drives that tow big boats? Because you are a trigger event engine for someone that sells four-wheel drives. And he said, no one's ever come to talk to me. So trigger events create context. Yep. So if we can monitor for trigger events and then engage somehow through a common connection, you've got context and trust. And those two things together are the fastest path and the highest probability to revenue with a new client. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important for everybody watching this to be absolutely committed to building a professional LinkedIn profile. We need to move away from our LinkedIn profile being an online CV, and instead treat our LinkedIn profile like it's a personal, micro-branded website for us, where we show our insights, and we elevate our credentials and professionalism, with the people in a network as well as the content that we publish, for example. So that's probably the keys to starting with trust, and then you create momentum with trust. Basically, in the quality of your insights and the questions that you ask and the level of research that you've done, the level of professionalism and follow-up, being rock solid, reliable on all of the small commitments before asking them for commitment on bigger ones. And if you engage as a peer, rather than being desperate or needy in any way, they're the things that really contribute to starting with trust and then building it quickly.
Yeah, spot on. And an example for me because I work in events, often the trigger event is taking people away for a leadership conference. So it's kind of like it is driven by the conference, the annual conference, and it's just about understanding the life cycle of that. So that does link to sales life cycle, doesn't it? Once you've got that relationship with the customer. In my CRM, in my previous business, I used to proactively put my own internal trigger to say, on average, I know they're going every 12 months, so I'm going to be the guy that calls them 3 months before, because I'm saying, hey, you're going to go to the Blue Mountains this year or the Hunter Valley? How's it going? How's the planning process? Are you tearing your hair out yet? You guys doing all right? Can I help you out in any way? Brilliant. Okay. Was there a specific point that you decided to become a LinkedIn influencer? Because you've got a very impressive following at around, I believe, 300,000 followers.
Yeah. The short answer is I published my first book. I was mentoring a salesperson in New York. We were doing a weekly Skype meeting together. And he said to me, look, Tony, your book is the best I've ever read on selling, but no one's ever heard of you. When are you going to get serious about your own personal brand in LinkedIn? And I just groaned and rolled my eyes and thought, who in the world has time for all of this narcissistic blasting and spamming in social media? No one really cares. Cut a long story short, over about a 7-week period, he convinced me I was wrong. He reverse mentored me. I was mentoring him and coaching him about strategic selling. He coached me about social media. And I decided to get really serious about it. And I engaged at kind of lunatic levels. I was publishing 1,000-word article every day, 7 days a week for 7 months, even while I was on holidays in Vietnam with my family, if you can believe this. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody else do that. And the window's closed, by the way, on LinkedIn to be able to do that. There's always a window of opportunity. It's very hard to build following in LinkedIn now. It's a very noisy platform.
Okay.
But I did this about 3.5, 4 years ago when there was the opportunity, and I just started to build big following to where I've been ranked twice in the last year as the #1 blogger in the world on B2B selling.
Wow.
LinkedIn have ranked me the #3 influencer in the world on sales, which is pretty amazing for someone from Sydney, given we're a relatively small part of the market. And there's, as we record this, there's close to 550 million LinkedIn members. There's 10 million in Australia. 2 people join a second, and it's the biggest publishing platform on the world. Yep. What a lot of people don't realize, it was out there before Facebook was.
Yep, certainly was.
And LinkedIn paid, $26.2 billion. That's $26,200 million US for LinkedIn, because it's really the global business social graph, really, or more crude terms, it's the modern yellow pages of the world, right? It's for actually getting to people, it's incredible. So anybody who's snoozing away and ignoring building their network, is every day that they keep ignoring it, they're making it harder and harder for them to remain relevant and to be successful.
Right, brilliant. Okay, so it was the book and that relationship that drove you to that change point. I've heard that time and time again from editors and people that are publishing books, etc. Often a publishing house won't even sometimes look at an author if they haven't got a million followers on Twitter or whatever it is. They say, well, what's your audience? What's your base? Interesting. Okay. In terms of the idea of LinkedIn having its windows closed, is it, in your eyes, do you see it like almost the Instagram story? Because Instagram, say 3 or 4 years ago, you could just add a certain number of hashtags to certain things, and as long as it was pretty photos and nicely put content, then through the hashtags and the algorithms, like boom, you get thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers. But it seems really hard. It seems quite hard now to build a following on things like Instagram. Do you think that's what's happened in LinkedIn in terms of what window exactly has closed from a technical perspective? Is it the hashtagging? Is it, what is it? It's just the noise, the content, the quantity?
Look, there's a long answer to this, but I'll give you the very short version. So, a number of years ago, anybody who was a first degree connection, when you publish content, they were notified about your content. That doesn't happen anymore. So LinkedIn is running an algorithm that they believe is in the best interest of their member. And that algorithm seeks to only push them content that the algorithm believes is most relevant to the person based on what they're doing on LinkedIn. So if you're trying to build following, and a personal brand on LinkedIn yourself, just connecting to yourself to people doesn't mean they're going to see your content, right? And then the other thing is LinkedIn groups, which they've changed their name away from LinkedIn groups, but LinkedIn groups have tended to die. People have got frustrated that they'll put a lot of effort into writing original articles, blog articles in LinkedIn, and they're getting very little readership. So what people tend to do instead is to do updates or posts, but that just drifts away in the stream of content, right? It doesn't have any permanence about it. And the other thing is, Donald Trump is famous for coining the term fake news. The reality is in every social platform on the face of the planet, not just LinkedIn, but all of them, a lot of the following is fake, right? If someone's mouse drifts across something, it'll register it as a read where the person didn't read it at all. Right? And there's a lot of bots out there that are automating the process of making it look like things are actually read. A really good friend of mine in the States sells marketing technology that helps companies detect all of the bots that are creating false impressions of reading content. Because what happens is these companies pay per click. It's an agency, yes. So they'll pay per click to get their product out there. But a lot of those clicks are done by bots. They're not done by human beings, right? So there's this huge level of fraud. So
that's so real. I've noticed that in online advertising, not just on LinkedIn. Like I've noticed with Google AdWords, on the YouTube video advertising that I do. I'm like, oh my God, I've had 6,000 views and the average view time's been 10 seconds. Really?
It's been 10 seconds. And So let me tell you the rule. The real measure is not views, not followers. The real measure is engagement. The real measure is engagement. Yes. And the reason I say the window's kind of closed with LinkedIn is it's getting harder and harder to get decent engagement on good quality content. Right. Now, one of the reasons is, we are in a digital world that is increasingly insanely noisy, right? It's insanely noisy, and people may want to watch, cats pushing ping pong balls around or something because it's entertaining. But people get sick of that and there's no real business value. So it's a really, really noisy world. It's very hard to cut through. So in business, we do want to run attraction marketing strategies, we do. But at the end of the day, if you're in business to business selling, you need to get really good at defining your ideal customer profile, the personas you sell into. You need to nail your conversation track, what I call your sort of value narrative. You need to have conversations that are about them, not us, and that provide value for them. And then you need to find ways to break through. And it's interesting you said about how publishing's changed. The big reason I got really active building followers is I wanted to publish my second book in the States. Right. And I knew that a publishing house wouldn't touch me unless I had big following. And I ended up getting a contract with the American Management Association on HarperCollins, but it was for that reason. So you're absolutely bang on.
Wow. Okay. It saddens me in a way about the article thing because, again, Daniel Mumby, just earlier this week, I was interviewing him. He's built, an impressive following as well. And his inspiration was that he did it through articles. And, he's managed to get himself into a really positive groove. His words were, for every word I write, I get a new follower. Maybe it's just because he's already got this big snowball that's kind of got this momentum behind it, perhaps. But it is sad, actually, because the article is indeed the permanent thing. And, I get it. I understand why algorithms are all about relevance. So there is some authenticity to that. But indeed, I think if it can't be left there permanently, then it's basically, I suppose, the onus is on, whether it be you, me, someone else, we have to pretty much post really engaging content regularly, if not every day. And that's what it comes down to. But that content is pretty much, it's a one-time event, isn't it?
Yeah, and to do that requires a huge commitment. And for any business that says, well, I as the leader will just outsource that to someone else to ghostwrite for me, the whole problem then is that it then tends to lack authenticity, and it
Yes.
becomes very, very formulaic. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Right. Right. Well, I mean, okay. It's good insight. It's good insight. It's made me think a little bit about the articles a bit more, but I think also the articles have got a place on LinkedIn still from a B2B point of view.
They do.
For the checking out elements, should we say the
Yes.
professional dating of it, you get the referral and someone goes,
Yeah.
hey, this guy's a good guy. Okay, I'll check him out on LinkedIn. Oh, that's an interesting article. And he's got this number of likes, or that's really well written,
Yeah,
or
it's
whatever.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why
So,
it's relevant still, right? Yeah.
yes, you're 100% correct, because 3/4 of the people that we run outreach to will check us out before choosing to engage, and it's typically LinkedIn. So those articles are where we can start to set an agenda. We can show insight and value.
Right. Okay. So when we say there's a closing window, I suppose there are certain elements that are closing, and there are certain factors that are still relevant. You've got the building of an
Absolutely.
audience, right? That's one
Yeah.
thing which we highlighted the restrictions on, so to speak.
Yeah, which is more difficult now. Yep.
More
But
difficult,
all
but
the other things are timelessly true. You're right.
right.
We need to represent our brand really well, and LinkedIn is the best place to do that for any professional today.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Okay. We probably may have already answered this question, but let me see if there's any other elements. I was going to say, what are some of the most successful strategies for B2B selling on LinkedIn?
Um, I was part of this. So about 2 years ago, I jumped on the social selling bandwagon. That's a term I'm assuming you've heard, social selling.
It is.
Um, Social selling is an important part of the multiple types of outreach that we all need to run. There's been an ear tickling lie that's been told to the world in the last few years, which is, no one answers the phone. Don't use the phone anymore. It's just now all digital. So just use social selling, right? Just publish content and the world will beat a path to your door. Just connect to people. Just do everything in social. And it's not true. The reality is people do answer their phone, especially their mobile phone. And for us to be successful, this is what my latest book is all about. It's called Combo Prospecting, and it's basically you need combinations of outreach if you're going to prospect and build sales pipelines. So it's phone, voicemail, email, text message, LinkedIn, fax machine, letter, carrier pigeon, pole vault over their moat onto the ramparts, like whatever it takes to break through to people. Use all of the available channels, use every way of getting to somebody until you find the way that works for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because like for me, if I look at my computer now, my inbox, I've got 21,500 unread emails in my inbox. I struggle to keep on top of my in-mail inbox. I've got more than 300,000 followers as we record this. So I get bombarded and drown. So some people are in LinkedIn every day. They see it as a really valuable engagement platform with their network. Other people go and look at it once every 2 weeks. The reality is you just don't know what works. So just try everything. But here's the secret. If you use one channel like social or email, if you use one channel, people ignore us. What we need to do is we need to pattern interrupt their propensity to ignore us, and we need to not confuse being ignored with being rejected. We just need to recognize people are
Yes.
busy. So long as our narrative is all about them and not about us, and we can provide value for them in a conversation, whether they buy anything or not, then we'll feel okay about being positively persistent and finding a way to break through.
Absolutely right. And on the picking up the phone thing, so I'm 35 and I very much believe in picking up the phone still. I think my general perception of generational differences is that, say, someone my age or above is more inclined to pick up the phone. Like, say, for example, if an email chain takes more than 3 emails, then we should pick up the phone because it's just getting
Yeah.
ridiculous. But I wonder, I'm not trying to badmouth any particular age groups or anything, but I do sort of sense that perhaps in a younger generation, there seems to be more of a propensity for either texting or emailing, because it's kind of like, oh, but I sent them a message, they didn't reply, and it comes back down to what you just said,
Yeah.
different angles, different things work for different people. And actually, they are just busy. It's nothing personal. And we must remember not to, that's where I link in personal development as well. We can't take things personally if someone has not replied. They may have just forgotten. They're bombarded.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Especially like
true.
in that example, 21,000 emails. Like, don't blame Tony if he doesn't get back to you on one, because he's got another
Well,
21,000.
well, I do my best, right? But there's just a limit.
Do you try to reply to a lot of messages?
I do. To be really honest with you, I nearly had a meltdown this year. I had an anxiety attack that I thought was a heart attack, and I went and got all checked out. I'm going in for a heart procedure next week. So a lifetime of massive stress and not
Yeah.
eating well. I was one of those guys that, I cycle, I exercise, I water ski, I look fit. I'm one of those guys where they go, gee, did you hear about Tony? He looks so fit and he dropped dead, right? So I've been very fortunate and blessed that I've become aware of an issue without having to have a heart attack or a stroke to actually find out. So, I would always try and get back to everybody. And I was very bad at saying no to people. I get bombarded by people saying, can you read my book? Can you write a forward? Can you have a look at my LinkedIn article? Could you review my product? I'm trying to hire someone. Do you know anybody? Can you give me personal coaching? I've just been bad at saying no. So I've just decided I just need to accept that chaos is normal. Just do your best.
Yeah, absolutely, and I wish you all the best with with the next stages. And I think it's really good that you've identified that actually it is practically impossible to be able to, especially in influencer position, to be able to
Yeah.
reply to everything. And that's only amplified by the digital connectivity of the world now, especially with things like on social media. So, yeah, interesting one to balance, and that's a very internal journey. Okay, so moving on to strategy. I've heard you say in an interview once, and I really liked this, that customer experience needs to be kind of backed up by a really clear CRM strategy, as well as just a good CRM system, and it all needs to be driven from strategy. Can you unpack that a little bit? How does a CRM impact a customer experience, and why is strategy the most important thing as a first step?
Well, strategy really addresses the whole issue of why we're doing what we're doing, what we're really trying to achieve, and identify those outcomes and risks. So CRM could describe a role in a business. A customer relationship manager could be a person. It could be a piece of technology. But the reality is we need to think about customer experience. We need to design customer experience from when we first touch a prospect through to when someone's a strong advocate for us in the marketplace and helping bring others to us that become customers. So, customer relationship management as a technology needs to be enabling some kind of process. Unless it's bringing marketing, sales, service, and support all together to create a single view of the client, to enable us to support their whole life cycle. And then unless we're treating our own salespeople or service people as the first customers before we think about external customers. So how is this system going to make them more productive, make their job easier, enable them to provide insights for the client? And then the other thing is the whole world today is expecting omni-channel experience anywhere, anytime. So, whether it's an app, a website, they want to phone a person or walk into your premises, they expect us to know them, or that they don't want to keep repeating
Personalized, right?
themselves.
Oh, I submitted
Absolutely.
on your website, but I signed up to the mail list. But I think absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. It's a long answer, but the thing is, CRM as a technology needs to be enabling that. And then where all of this is going is with AI and automation.
Yeah,
So,
100%. There's an interesting link there to automation, isn't there? Because this reminds me of my IT days. You'd always go into a client to implement a big project and you say, what's the business process before we even talk about the IT system? And often what happens, especially in a large company, is they've been using a particular system for years, that the legacy system is called in industry speak. And because they've been using it for 10 years, they assume that, but I click that button, that means that's the process, right? Because they've just got so used to that system, and it's so necessary to get away from that old system and think, what actually do we want to achieve? What does the customer need? What are we not doing that we could be doing? And how can that new system support that? And it's the old time wisdom in IT that the system should not drive the business process. The business process should drive the system. So it's the same in sales. It's the same in any process in business, isn't it? And then the automation thing's interesting, isn't it? Because, You can do so many, even if you're a small business and you've got like MailChimp, right? You can do so many clever things in terms of, hey, here's something on my website that I can give to you. Give me your details. Automatically, I will send you something, and that will create a lead in the CRM. And then in 3 weeks' time, we'll send you some wonderful education-based marketing content that you'll find valuable, and that'll help build the relationship. And that needs to be integrated, and that's the pre-sales journey as well, isn't it? As well as the
It is.
never mind picking up the phone. Like build that connection. Yeah, fascinating.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I love all this stuff, and as you can probably tell, I'm still got a bit of a techie geek in me. I implement this stuff myself within my own business because I love touching how that's going to work and connecting that dot in that way, and really, really understanding it.
Look, and technology is so important because the thing we know about the future without doubt is that it's going to be filled more and more with technology, and we need to be good at working with technology to make ourselves relevant and to increase our level of productivity.
There's a guy that I met. I did a TED Talk in October, and one of the other speakers was Douglas Nicol, if I remember his name correctly. And he works for The Works in Sydney, and he talks about emotionally intelligent AI, and he's also doing some work in emotionally intelligent chatbot technology. So the idea is it's not just some crappy chatbot. It's something that actually can genuinely connect with your customer and provide a great experience, but it's integrated in the back end, I'm sure, to the CRM. It's all. Do you know what? I think as technology expands and the omni-channel, which just means lots of ways of interacting with the business, as technology expands, I think there's a pressure on businesses to somehow connect so many extra blankets together that weren't previously connected in terms of areas of the business, whether that be accounts connecting in an extra way, or or the website connecting in an extra way. So it's you got to see it holistically, don't you?
You do. You absolutely do. I agree.
Yep. I get all animated about business stuff. You'll have to forgive my enthusiasm. What's the best CRM for small to medium businesses?
Well, if you're in business and you're absolutely confident that you're going to grow and become bigger, in my view, Salesforce, because you're not going to have to re-implement something.
Yes. Right.
If you're a really small business and you're just wanting to maybe to manage marketing automation into initial opportunities, maybe something like Pipedrive. But to me, you can't go past Salesforce because it does marketing, sales, service support. They're making amazing investments in AI. Their Einstein product.
Are they? That's interesting. Okay.
The ability to drive away from a meeting and use Siri, for example, or Alexa to dictate meeting notes, to change forecast, deal values, dates. You just talk to Siri and it hands off to Einstein in the background. It changes all of that automatically. So, to be able to dial out of CRM, to email out of CRM easily, to have AI predictively coach you on deals, to actually have the AI inside the platform say, there's been no calls or emails logged with this opportunity for 10 days, and it's at this stage. What experience tells us is that the deal is at risk if you don't keep the communication going. I suggest you reach out to this particular contact. So it's even starting to do the job of a sales manager and doing very accurate forecasting.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps, but it's so relevant because I've used Zoho. I use Zoho, right? And I think but before I ask you what you think of that, one of the things that I do in that is I schedule tasks and I implement these aspects of workflow so that we can truly and workflow is very important. What do you think of Zoho overall?
Zoho is fine. It's cheap. So open source products, are lower cost. I mean, it really depends. The thing I've come to discover in life is that whenever you do something cheap, you end up re-implementing and having to migrate to the real thing you should have done in the first place.
Yes.
And it actually ends up costing you more.
It does.
So, the thing I say to my clients is don't waste your time and resources running big complex evaluation processes for CRM. just go with Salesforce.
Get it
You're not
right.
going to look back you're not going to look back and go, that was a mistake. They're making the big investments in AI, that they've got the necessary scale to bring the things that you'll need as a business to drive productivity. Put your energy into figuring the hell out about what you actually are trying to achieve, because the thing that makes my head explode is so many organizations obsess about selecting which CRM product, and they haven't invested the energy to figure out, what are we actually trying to do with CRM? What processes are we trying to enable? What risks are we trying to manage? How are we going to make people more productive, right? As we deploy this, how does it enable end-to-end customer experience? What's our strategy? You ask those questions and they're a deer in the headlight. All they want to do is ask their 473 questions about CRM as a technology. And I don't know what the stats are today, but I remember the Butler Group out of the UK did research a number of years ago. What they discovered was 70% of CRM implementations failed. And it wasn't because the technology was no good, it's because the customer was no good. They weren't clear about what they're trying to achieve. So, I just think every business needs to hold a mirror up and ask themselves the hard questions about, why do they want one of these things, and are they up for putting in the proper time and effort to implement it well. Otherwise, you just get this manage up for forecasting tool that no one believes, and an expensive contacts database.
Oh wow, yeah, brilliant. You've actually really inspired me there to take a look at Salesforce in particular. And on the AI thing, making a brief comment on the workflow idea, a lot of workflow things in businesses still require a human to either input something, review something, click yes on a tick box or not, and blah blah blah. So the fallibility, this is why the machines will take over the world, is that the AI will come in and go, hey, wait a minute, none of you have done this. You should call these 5 customers there. I think it's actually extremely smart. What are some of the outside of let me qualify this, outside of AI, if I may, or tell me if I can't, what are some of the top emerging trends in sales that we all need to look out for over the coming years?
The big trend in sales is for lots of jobs to go away. So if all you are is a person that helps people transact commodities, you are in trouble. If all you are is a professional visitor that buys people coffee and does lots of meetings with people, then you are in trouble. Every seller, every account manager has got to figure out, how do I elevate the level of value that I provide so that I can fund my role appropriately, right? So everything drifts towards commoditization over time. We live right now in the 4th industrial revolution, and just like the 3 industrial revolutions that preceded this, many, many, many jobs will disappear. So the thing I say to sellers is, to remain relevant, you've got to work out how you can be man and machine working together to get new levels of productivity and get the tech working for you. If you look at just trends in the sales industry, we all know that most websites now have got chatbots on them, where you can type and engage with someone that's not a person. Sometimes they're trying to pretend that they are, but they're not. The big trend is now going to be video bots, digital humans. And I saw a video, I show this at conferences I speak at, of a digital human, a digital person selling somebody a credit card over the computer. So the AI is looking at the real human being through the webcam, and it's reading their body language, their facial movements. And even when the person says really, the AI knows whether that's a skeptical really, an excited really, or a tell me more really. And this AI asks the person a whole bunch of questions and then recommends the right credit card for them, and then passes them off to a proper human being to go through the sign-up process. Daimler, Chrysler, Mercedes right now are looking at how they can get these digital humans selling motor cars online in coming years, because as more and more cars go electric, the dealer model is going to face oblivion, because dealers make most of their money from parts and servicing, not from selling new cars. And for self-driving electric cars, there is no service revenue for the dealer anymore. So the manufacturers, and in New Zealand right now as we speak, Toyota have taken control of their whole dealer channel. You walk into a Toyota dealer in New Zealand, there is no discounting. right? The price is set by Toyota New Zealand. The dealers have no bandwidth, not one iota to discount or haggle. The price is set by Toyota. So they're taking control of their channel, getting ready for all of this. So the rise of the bots is real. Digital disruption is real. The fourth industrial revolution is here. We should all feel threatened and also excited. So there's an opportunity for those that embrace tech really well for them to be more productive and more effective than any of their competition.
Yeah, you've signaled the warning perfectly there for people that actually already work in sales, and I think it's very real. And for those interested, just to bolt on to everything that you just said, Tony, on one of my previous podcasts with this Douglas Nickel gentleman, it's called Emotionally Intelligent AI. Emotionally Intelligent AI, and he, in the TED Talk as well, he literally talked about, apparently, I think it was like the average human or something can spot when someone is feeling sad via facial expressions only 40% of the time, only 40%, but already within AI technology, combining facial, voice, and other recognition pieces, they've got it above 85%. So it's literally more than twice as good at actually spotting emotional intelligence than a human being. So yeah, this stuff is real. To me, when I first heard these things, I thought, oh, no. But the more people I talk to, it's actually already here.
It is here. It's here already. Everybody interacts with AI every day of their lives.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Wow. Okay. Well, Tony, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned so much out of it. Really have. Can you tell us what's on the horizon for 2019? We're recording this in December now in 2018. What have you got on for the year ahead?
I've just got a whole lot of speaking. I've got a whole bunch of global clients that I actually work with. So my next book will be a leadership book. But I just encourage people, if you'd like to connect with me with LinkedIn, I'd certainly welcome that. I blog inside LinkedIn. I've got over 500 articles there, so I share everything that I know for free. So you can follow me there. I've also got 2 websites. My sales methodology website is rsvpselling.com, and my speaker author website is tonyhughes.com.au. And Chris, thanks for having me on.
Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really, thank you so much, and hope to connect with you soon.